Right, just let me know.
All right. Welcome everyone to the monthly PSR guest speaker meeting. This is the meeting of Physicians for Social Responsibility Florida, and we welcome everybody. We're really excited to be here today. Our amazing guest speaker comes to us from Florida Conservation Voters here doing lots and lots of work in Florida, and is an expert in constitutional law. And just found out that she actually teaches constitutional law. So expert that she's a reference on the subject at the university. And it is my pleasure to turn the media over to speak to us about the recent SCOTUS ruling on EPA and how it will impact Florida. Bethzaida Olivera.
Thank you so much, Lakey, and thank you everybody for having me today. My name is Bethzaida Olivera, and I am the Climate and Clean Energy Policy Advocate for Florida Conservation Voters. I am an attorney by trade, and my specialty is constitutional law, legislative process, environmental laws, and criminal justice. So I try to cover a little bit of everything. Today, Lakey asked me, and I'm more than humbled and honored to be here to discuss a little bit about the West Virginia versus EPA decision and how it affects Florida. All right. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background on why this came to be. So in 2015, the EPA created a clean power plan rule, which addressed greenhouse emissions from existing coal and natural gas fired power plants, right? So the reason why they did this is because there's a provision inside the Clean Air Act that actually authorizes them to regulate these greenhouse emissions and other pollutants that were produced by these power plants, which you would think, okay, you know, they have the power, they can do it. So originally the provision in the Clean Air Act said that it would be only applicable for new stationary sources, which is grids and also power plants. But also they made an exception that in some cases, existing stationary sources, like I said, like old power plants and old electrical grids, that rule was going to be applied. So what the EPA did is that under the clean power plan, they established what the emissions were going to be for old and new power plants. And that's where some states and some people started to get uncomfortable. States actually are the ones that can rule any existing stationary sources. But the EPA, under this exception, they could do it. So the agency determined through this clean power plan that yes, we have these carbon emissions. Yes, we need to reduce greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a transition plan from coal and natural gas to renewable resources. In 2019, so in 2015, the court had this case, West Virginia brought this case. So in 2019, the EPA, under a different administration, established that the Clean Power Plan exceeded the agent's authority. So they actually created a new one. And basically what it does is that it, yes, establishes the greenhouse emissions, some limits, but also, and I am sorry if this sounds a little bit boring, but this is very important, but also limits how coal-based plants are going to work. Congress, or usually when it comes to things that of this nature that have to control a specific economic sector, they usually, you have to authorize that explicitly in the law. So the Supreme Court finally sees this case recently, and they understood that under the under the doctrine of major questions, Congress did not delegate that faculty to the EPA. However, in the Clean Air Act, it's very specific. So they're saying basically that this plan for the EPA plan to reduce carbon emissions carries consequences of economic and political significance. So this decision stripped the EPA of its faculties to actually limit greenhouse emissions and other pollutants into the air. And it basically empowers, this is our understanding. So you strip the EPA and then you leave states to limit or regulate all the greenhouse emissions, but then you see how West Virginia as a state is actually defending a whole sector of the economy that dedicates itself to pollute. So that was something that was very shocking to us. Like I was telling Lakey at the beginning of our conversation when I went into the Zoom, this is the first time that I see anything like this, because usually when you have public interests such as health and the well-being of everybody, you do a balance of interest, and usually it tilts a little bit more onto the health side. In this case, they basically gave carte blanche to these utilities and to these companies and that have been polluting to do whatever they need to do for economic gain. And how is this related to Florida? That's a very good question. So according to the Tampa Bay Times, the Supreme Court will limit how federal regulators can actually force power plants to move away from fossil fuels, and that's going to delay the effects on climate change. This decision, like I had just said, leaves the states to decide what the future of climate change public policy is going to look like, and also empowers utilities to forego any emission standards established by the EPA without being held accountable. So basically, these utility companies and power plants they can do whatever they want, and they're not going to be held accountable because you literally have stripped the EPA of these faculties. And Florida, as you know, Florida is one of the most vulnerable places in the planet, according to the IPCC report. We got 8,000 miles of shoreline. We also have, for example, here in Hillsborough, we have one of the worst air qualities in the nation. And the weather is getting hotter, the waters are getting warmer, and we need to do something. So it is I understand that the only way this could actually be solved is if Congress actually submits any type of legislation to cure or to resolve this issue regarding EPA's authority, even though it's already stated in the Clean Air Act. So any questions? I know I gave you basically it's a very long case. One of the things that I found interesting is that you got states saying, okay, so you're basically empowering people, just, you're allowing them to pollute for economic gain. So that was something that was very interesting for me to see. And obviously we need to start moving towards cleaner energy sources. And the only way we can do that is actually if we start organizing and moving and engaging with our communities and educating them about the dangers of fossil fuels and the need for us to go to solar or any other renewable energy source. Any questions, any comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
So this throws me back to Roe versus Wade or the Dobbs. I mean, it's the same thing that I'm sort of feeling inside of me as far as it's a states' rights issue. This should be determined by the states. They're really not saying it's okay for you to pollute as long as you make money off of it. They're really saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is not something that we as a Supreme Court should be directing or the EPA should be directing. It's something that the state should be directing.
Yes and no.
Okay.
So remember that the Supreme Court has to only deals with cases and controversies. And this is what the Constitution says. It's basically, this opinion is basically just given advice. It's something that you're not supposed, that the Supreme Court was not supposed to do, because it was very clear. And in order for them to do something so controversial, you're absolutely right, they just give this responsibility to the states to actually regulate, but they're already doing that. What they does is that it doesn't recognize the EPA's ability or faculty or even jurisdiction of establishing what the greenhouse emissions limits should be. The only thing that the states can do is regulate or have rules on how power plants operate, as well as how the electrical grids are going to work, they're going to function, and they're going to be built. So the other part about the greenhouse gas emissions and carbon dioxide and other pollutants, that is something that's occupied by the federal level. And this decision basically says no, that if it's too broad and it affects any economic interest of a whole sector, then they're gonna not recognize the agency's faculty to do so.
Hey, my name is John Lyons. I'm here with my family watching this. This is a matter that is important to all of us. The question that I have, again, follows on the Roe versus Wade, particularly in its wording and how it pushes responsibilities to the state level. And then it was quickly followed on by this EPA guidance that came out of the Supreme Court. With what you just said in regards to if there's an economic incentive associated with the enforcement, how do we, there's like a tragedy of the commons situation here. Air and water are shared resources by all people. West Virginia is a horrible state to look at. They have tragic environmental policies that have been in place and consequences from disasters that have taken place there as well. They're a net receiver of government Superfund money. Do we have a worry with the wording of Roe versus Wade that we're going to see more things like this get stripped away? Thank you.
It is very worrisome, and thank you for the comparison with Roe versus Wade. It is very similar, and what we fear is that over here in the state of Florida, we have utilities that are not inclined to start using clean energy resources. And this is because it is cheaper for them to keep using fossil fuels. So we're worried about this. We're worried that it's going to be a ripple effect, not only with personal rights such as Roe versus Wade, but also with everything that has to do with the environment and also in other areas that are protected by the Bill of Rights. So does that answer your question? So yeah, we're really worried about that, specifically because they're doing this for they're using the economic gain aspect. So that's something that that's very worrisome. David Sinclair, you had a question? I can hear you.
Yes, I put it in the chat.
Okay. So no, they actually didn't mention any element in the, I can't hear you, David.
Would you like to read the question for the
So
audience?
yes, David asked me, are elements of the EPA's good work that the SCOTUS decision has not touched, such as influencing the setting of new air quality standards? No, they did not mention that. They basically just touched on the EPA's ability to do rules regarding those emission standards. It is part of the Clean Air Act, but the way how they interpret it, to me, it's very erroneous. Obviously, they have their own judicial discretion, but they should have done a more a different approach and use a balance of interest, because health and the well-being of the people of West Virginia and other states are at stake, and allowing this sector of the economy that dedicates to pollute everything, it's something that's a very dangerous approach. And unfortunately, they didn't mention any of the EPA's good work. They actually just, said, you can't do this and you're doing wrong and you're being overbearing. They, the way how I saw it, and this is my personal opinion, it does not reflect FCB's opinion, Florida Conservation Voters' opinion. To me, they painted the EPA to be a villain in this whole case when it's not the situation. All right. Thank you so much, David, for that question. Any other question?
Yeah.
Ron,
Okay.
Ron, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi, Ron Saff here. Could you
Hi, Ron.
comment? Hi, can you comment, please, on the upcoming Supreme Court case of Harper versus Moore and when that's going to be heard?
I have no idea when it's going to be heard. However, I will be checking on it. And I apologize, I don't have enough information on that one. Can you give me a little bit of information, a little bit of background on that case?
Sure, that's the law that says that when it comes to presidential elections, no matter what the voters decide, the state legislatures get to decide. So essentially, if the Supreme Court voted the wrong way, it would throw the power to decide an election to the state legislatures, despite the will of the people. And since 30 state legislatures are controlled by Republicans, it's just sort of a way of gutting democracy.
Okay, so I'm gonna read it, but out of the top of my head, to me, so the Supreme Court was created by our founding fathers to basically see any cases and controversies, and not only that, if they see a law that is unconstitutional, to declare it so. From what you're telling me, to me, it sounds like that approach is unconstitutional. I don't believe that the Supreme Court is actually going to auto-limit herself to see that type of case. But it's something I will look the information. I'm going to read the case, and I will definitely send some information to Lakey about it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Of course. Anybody else has another question, comment?
Janet, did you have your hand up?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Janet.
Okay. I just wanted to add a thought that maybe shows I'm a little more optimistic about what's going to happen, in that it's hard to imagine that utility companies would want to invest a whole lot of money into non-clean energy, knowing that there could be legislation in the future that would start controlling how much emissions and so on. Kind of like what happened with the automobile industry when our previous administration cut back on some of the emission standards and mileage standards and so on. And the car companies did not go back to big gas guzzlers. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. So maybe it's not quite as bad as it would end up being, just because the utility companies are not going to keep building coal plants for sure, because they know at some point they may not be able to run them.
Yes, but that's in West Virginia. Over here in Florida, right now we have a 10-year site plan that utilities have to submit to the Public Service Commission, their 10-year site plan, and includes expanding grids, expanding some of their operations, and also they're actually, I mean, FPL was actually proposing building more gas plants and also using other types of fossil fuels. So for not weatherization for winter, in case there's a winter emergency or anything. So Howard.
Oh, thank you. So getting back to the EPA decision and what Lyons said regarding tragedy of the commons, and what I think you said regarding usually the Supreme Court is leaning toward the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens, which they don't seem to be doing in this decision. If lawsuits, legal action is brought by those who have standing under the negative impacts to health and environment, what is your opinion regarding how the Supreme Court would look to take those cases or to respond to them?
That's a very good question. Right now, due to how the court is in terms of composition, I can't actually say how they're going to see it, or if they're even going to take the cases and see them, which is something that's very worrisome. I would say right now, the Supreme Court has a lot of issues. They're a little bit backed up in terms of cases. And one of the things that they need to do is expand the court. Probably if the court was a little bit more balanced in terms of composition, I would say that they would see those cases and they would actually use, I'm a purist in terms of constitutional law. They will use this balance of interest, which is what is which is what they needed to do in the beginning, but they didn't. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. Anybody else has any questions, comments?
I have a question really quick. Thanks for giving me that opportunity. So given Florida's recent decisions, the preemption bills that were passed 2 years ago and the one that passed again this year, but then was vetoed by the governor to basically limit local ability to promote clean energy, right? And to have local municipalities pass clean energy resolutions. And the state of our legislature, like the way it's leaning and its constant attacks, especially on, I feel probably I'm a bit of a pessimist. I think they're a little better on the environment than they are on some other issues, but is there any state maybe that we can look at, or another example of a better state or more moderate state that has legislation that we can try at a state level, even though it might not pass, to begin pounding around and putting forward in election years, and then also carrying that same sort of message to Congress that they need to get something done to overcome this? Is there policy engagement that we can pick at the state level and maybe even at the federal level to overcome the SCOTUS ruling? I guess is what I'm trying to ask. It was a long-winded ask, but
No, you're fine. So there are many states that for example, as a policy expert, that I see, and this is what I want Florida to be. You have the state of Washington. California is the gold standard regarding gas emissions and greenhouse gases, and also clean energy. You have, oh my God, Maryland is moving towards a good place regarding electronic vehicles. Just as the state of New York is also one of the standards that we should look at, but mainly in Oregon and Colorado. So the gold standard is California. That is something that we should all aspire to in terms of environmental and clean energy and everything that has to do with environmental policy. That is the dream. And we're working towards that. There are many things that we can do as organizations. We can engage, obviously, with representatives that that have a good record in terms of voting and promoting any environmental measure. For example, right now, my organization, Florida Conservation Voters, we are promoting a campaign to in support of Florida lawmakers requesting a climate state of emergency. We're requesting the governor to declare a climate state of emergency. And you're thinking, why? Well, climate state of emergency affects a lot of things. It gives the governor the necessary tools and the resources for him to establish programs so we can start deterring climate change, the harmful effects of climate change. That would mean that we could start transitioning to cleaner energy sources. That would mean that we would do everything in our power to clean our waters. That would mean to stop shoreline construction that is killing our reefs, and it's basically sinking our cities. That would mean many things. That would be no offshore drilling of the coast of Mexico. That would mean so many things that we could do if we actually had serious leadership and leaders that are interested in actually doing something instead of thinking of economic gain. These types of campaigns, right now we are partnering with other organizations. These types of campaigns are very important. One of the things that helped for the net metering bill to be vetoed was partnering, making outreach, getting to those communities that are in most need, and sending out the message, educating, and making them move to make pressure to the governor, because apparently that's the only way he's going to do it. So
Great, thank you. And let us know how PSR can help support the climate emergency campaign.
I appreciate it. Yes. We're going to start doing some events. So we would love for you to join us.
Right? Yeah. I'll reach out to you about that.
Any other questions for me?
Doesn't look like it. Looks like you're off the hook. And
I,
thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been amazingly insightful and very concise and packaged in a nice, neat, and chewable and attractive and digestible bits. So thank you for deciphering what is a massive decision and then rolling it into something that we can all understand. I know that's not easy. So really
yes.
thank you for taking time with us today.
Of course, it is my pleasure. This is what I live for. I love explaining things and especially when it has to do something with that is so important, that has to do with constitutional law and the environment, that it's something that's very dear to my heart. And I am honored to be here, and thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else who wants to come off mute and say thank you, feel free, or drop it in the chat.
Yep, we
And
did.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Thank you.